Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome back to our yet another webinar series from Nature Writing for Children, brought to you by Azim Premji University as part of its broader Seeking Sustainability initiative. This series has been running, since over a year now, since October 2020, and we have been having authors from all types and creeds talking about their work that they have bought, detailing the kind of effort that goes into writing these books, talking about the nature writing genre in particular, and also talking about the way, this whole books are being embraced by children and how they are taking up these kind of books within their own, for their reading and for their own, in school and education as well. So today we have a very unique set. We have. It's not unusual for us to have a set of authors with us, but today these authors have an extra role that they play. They are also editors at a very interesting publication group that they work with. It's called as Kalpavriksh. Now, Kalpavriksh, based out of Pune, has been an environment action group which has been working for quite many decades now, bringing out very interesting set of documents, reports, research on various topics which are completely related to environment and protection and conservation. Of course, the publication business, which has a great footprint in terms of the children books that they publish. So we are very, I should say, I'm very glad and happy to have with us, Sujatha Padmanabhan, who's a trained teacher. And she's an educator who has been associated with the Kalpavriksh for, I think so, ever since 1980s, if I'm not wrong, if I got that correct, 1984. So it's a long stint that she has been doing, and she has been part of a very interesting initiative that Kalpavriksh has brought about, bringing out these books, and we'll be talking about that later. So welcome on board, Sujatha.
Thank you so much, and thank you really for having us on today.
Yeah, and joining her would be Tanya Majmudar, who's another, she's an author, she's a designer, and very interestingly, she's a engineer by trading, mechatronics, if I'm not wrong. She has a very unique blend of skills and expertise that she brings on the table. Welcome on board, Tanya, and we look forward to having a very interesting conversation with you.
Thank you, Shashwat.
Yeah. So, without much ado, let me kickstart the conversation. And before I do, just one small note to all our users and viewers. You can, punch in or type in your comments or questions for the authors in the live chat box that is there. Towards the end of the program, we'll definitely take them up and post them to our, authors. So with that, let's begin with our conversation today. So just to, set the ball rolling, Sujatha, let's start with, Kalpavriksh itself. As I said, it's an environmental action group known for the lot of different work that it does. How does can you just detail something about their activities and the kind of the scale that they have?
Yeah. So, like you said, Kalpavriksh is more than 40 years old actually at the moment. Over 4 decades of work in India. With its office in Pune. But I'd just like to mention that it had a very interesting beginning in the sense that it was in the 70s when a group of young people, they were in school, in high school, and some of them were in college, and they just got together, kind of disturbed by some of the things that they were seeing around them. And one of the first things they did together as a group, before the organization was formed, was to protest the felling of trees in the Delhi rich forest. Delhi has a very large area which is forested. It's actually one of the biggest forests, urban forests in the world. And so you had this group of youngsters, walking along the streets in Delhi, carrying placards and things like that. And this protest, this getting together, I think led them to protest about other things as well. So very soon they were meeting Morarji Desai, the then Prime Minister, because rhesus macaques were being exported out of the country. So they wanted a ban on that. There was another instance when they got together when the Indian government had given Saudi Arabia, they used to give licenses, for bustards, these very large birds which are found in grasslands, a license to kill, a license to shoot, to hunt. These many youngsters got together in front of the embassy, and I think probably embarrassed the Indian government because the media picked it up and splashed it in the newspapers. And there were even these placards which said, "Eat custard, not bustard." And the government then withdrew the license at that time. So many instances of action, local action, all in Delhi, brought these people, these youngsters together, and soon they spoke about, working together under an organization. That was actually the birth of Kalpavriksh. And I'd just like to add, I think that for years, I mean, the group has been kind of, I think, guided by a lot of idealism, and that still exists, I think, today. I'd be happy to say that. For years, nobody was paid, for quite some years, and everybody just worked voluntarily. There was no office, so meetings were held in Lodi Garden under a tree. Files and papers and books were stored in members' homes, so there was no need to really have an office space. So I think there was great idealism at that time. And I think some of that is still there within the group today. We're still small. We've resisted the temptation of growing large. And I think one of our greatest things is that we are non-hierarchical. It's all decisions are made to whatever extent is possible by the entire group. So we don't have actually one head who takes all the decisions. About what we do today was your other question. Our work focuses today is around three themes. One is conservation and livelihoods, which is something that the group has worked in this area for decades. I think the principal vision of that is that local communities should be in charge of decision-making processes, and should be able to take the decisions for their landscapes, the natural resources around them. So it's like, local governance should be in their hands. And the group, I think, through methods like field investigations, documentation, training, networking, and things like that, work in issues that are there with protected areas, as well as community conserved areas, what are called CCAs, where the community is actually active in conserving the area around them. Another thematic focus, more recent for the organization, is what we call alternatives, where it's basically a search for what kind of transformation in the country, in our society, would actually lead us to the kind of society that we wish. So it's not just, say, ecological resilience or sustainability, but it's more than that. We have more issues than that. So it's also dealing with issues of, say, power relations, and they manifest in caste, in class, in ability, disability, gender, and so on. Need definitely for cultural respect for cultural diversity, respect for knowledge diversity, and also addressing economic inequities that are there in the country. So it's a very broad canvas, but there's a lot of work that has happened in documenting on-ground initiatives that strive towards such a society, such a world. Initiatives by individuals, by organizations, NGOs, by community-based groups, and so on, through films, through stories, through case studies, and also providing platforms for these groups to get together, to be able to share experiences, to be able to network together, to collaborate together, and so on.
Yeah, interesting. Sujata, and this brings to a very interesting thought that while Kalpavriksh has been around for well over so many decades, the problems that exist in our society in terms of climate. Take the example, the Great Indian Bustard itself. It's still doddering on the verge of extinction even today at this moment. So it's very odd that despite all these years that have gone into creating a movement for all these things, we're still kind of it's like walking on a treadmill at sometimes. So keeping that in mind, I would like to get a thought from possibly you, Tanya, the relevance of nature writing genre per se. What do you think are the important aspects to that genre, and why do you think it's important?
Um, Thanks, Shashwat. I think so. If I think about Kalpavriksh's work, it is like Sujatha mentioned, 40 years old, long before I was born. It's been working on so much, but then the impact is also probably related to the environment sector or the social sector, and if if we were to think about it, the children's book work that we do is the only aspect of our work where we can reach a wider audience. So that is for us one big reason. And of course, all children's literature is important in how it shapes your thinking and shapes our future. And within that, if we can bring in the perspectives of our rich experience. So, for example, Kalpavriksh, we've published books not just on nature and wildlife, but also aspects of like what Sujata was talking about, environmental governance, through a story for kids or community conservation through various stories. So these are books that, these are messages that we can bring to the world, which maybe other publishers who don't have this rich history would not be publishing. So,
Yeah, because it's very interesting, because at one end you're having a very high end output in terms of the research and the reports and those kind of things, and on the other, so just I, for all the viewers, I would like to say we have featured Kalpavriksh book in the past. We had Critters Around Our Home, which was a Kalpavriksh publication. Pankaj Seksaria, another one who's waiting for the turtles, who had spoken. He's associated with Kalpavriksh. So just for that, but for the sake of all of us, if you can just Sujata, and can you take us through when did this publication start? Give us some details about the kind of work that you're doing.
See, publications for Kalpavriksh has had a long history. In fact, I think it was probably years back. A group when the group was still young, a group did a long trek along the Majmudar river when the dam was proposed, and to study the impacts of the dam. And they actually wrote a report on it, which was the first report on the impacts of the dam. Kalpavriksh produced a graphic novel on the issues related to the Narmada Dam. I think that was also the first graphic novel. That's what I'm told. It was the first graphic novel in India. And subsequently, all the thematic groups would produce whatever they needed to produce on what they were working on. Sometimes it would be a report after a field investigation. Sometimes it would be a policy brief, just to be able to explain a particular policy a little more simply for people, or to simplify an act, write out the provisions clearly so that it could be understood. Or documentation, like documenting the community conserved areas. A whole directory has been produced. But that kind of that publication was for a niche readership. It would be an interested person who would pick up something which is related to a particular law or a policy. The work around children's publications started actually with one publication that we did, which is called Ghost of the Mountains. That's story based in Ladakh, around a human-wildlife conflict issue. That was part of an environment education program that we were doing at that time in Ladakh. So one of the thematic focus areas of Kalpavriksh is environment education. And for about 2 decades, the focus, I mean, earlier we did talks and slides and films, showing films, etc. in the early days. But for about 2 decades, the focus was on creating educational material and resources for local areas where the focus was that particular area or region, locale-specific education program. And we did this always at the request of local NGOs. So we did get a request from the Snow Leopard Conservancy India Trust, which is an NGO based in Leh, and their objective is the conservation of the snow leopard. And they'd invited us to work out a program for this, for government schools. So this particular book was part of the work with the Snow Leopard Conservancy. Now, subsequently, what happened? Some years later, we had an invitation from NGOs in Kachchh, again to produce material for the region of Kachchh. Now, Kachchh is, I think, the second largest district in India and has 5 different ecosystems, including the salt desert. So, diversity of species. And when planning what we would develop with the local NGOs in Kachchh, we came up with 2 storybooks, which we wrote in English, but was later we got them translated into Gujarati. And the 2 books, one is on the ecosystems of Kachchh through a story, which is called Khari Journeys Through Kachchh. And the second is on, introduces children to some of the wildlife that is found in Kachchh through a storybook called Shero to the Rescue. So those were really the early years. And subsequently what happened fairly recently is that we got a request from the Tata Trust, where they have this program, the Parag Initiative, and to support literacy, they do support publishers, and they wrote to us asking us if we would be interested in publishing books on nature, wildlife, environment, etc. We had long discussions in the office before we said yes, but I think what did help us take a decision saying that we'll get into it was our experience with the previous books. So we had by then, I think Tanya and I built up a certain confidence to be able to take this work forward. So that really was the genesis of this work.
Very interesting. And if you want to tell me, you gave us a glimpse, what are the kind of books that you have, you spoke about snow leopards and you spoke about Kachchh. So if you can just show us, give us a sense of the bouquet of books that you have coming out of your publications.
Sure. Actually, I have a presentation of all the covers at least. So if I can just share that. So basically, we publish books on, as we said, nature and wildlife and environmental issues, conservation issues, things like that. So, so these books here are on natural history. So we like to publish books of lesser known creatures. So like this Sahi's Quest is about a dragonfly, Portrix is about a pangolin. Then Circle of Life is about bees, honeybees, and how they live in their hives, the different types of bees and their tasks and roles in the hive. Traveling Seeds is about how seeds propagate. It's written in verse and it's beautifully illustrated by Lavanya. And that was actually, it was longlisted for the Green Knit Fest Award, WWF, and Sahi's Quest won that one. So both of them are also really interesting books. More on natural history, we have the Poop Book, of which Sujatha is a co-author. That is easily by far our best-selling book. It's about different animals and how they poop and how they use their poop and what they do with their poop, and it's funny and it's very Then critters around our homes, as you said, you had a talk on that. It's by Sanjay Sondi, who is also a Kalpavriksh member. And Secrets of the Jungle is actually an activity book. So it has information on the species, like plants and animals of central India. And this we did in collaboration with an NGO working in central India, who are working around the tiger reserves there. So for the children of those areas, and it was also published in Hindi. So that's an activity book along with information about animals. Um, then we also, like to focus on regions or different regions in India. So Khari, as Sujatha mentioned, was an output of our Kachchh project, uh, which describes the different eco. So Kachchh is such a diverse place. There's the salt flats, there are mangroves, there's the coast, there's a thorn forest. It's such a rich and diverse region, and it's not really that well known in terms of its ecology. Uh, Even for kids, they are taught in Gujarati as opposed to Kachchh, which is their local language. So to so our like locale specific education program was focused on localized wildlife, flora, fauna, things, games and books and all for the local kids, and this was one of the outputs of that. Similarly, Ghost of Mountains is about Ladakh. It's written by Sujatha, so she can tell you more about it later. It's about snow leopards and its conservation. And Chitti, a dog and her forest farm, is is about a dog living on a forest farm in the middle of the Western Ghats. So that's again about the region. Then about so conservation and environmental action is also one of the categories of books. So this first one here, People and Wildlife, it's a collection of 10 stories about community conservation efforts around India. So, like Sujatha mentioned, Kalpavriksh does a lot of work on with communities, and their methods of like documenting and mapping and highlighting the efforts that are done by communities in order to conserve their areas. So we thought it was high time that something like that came out for children. So this is a collection of 10 stories. We have like stories from forests, from the seacoast, from the mountains, like all kinds of ecosystems from all corners of India, even urban areas. So that's very much close to our work, that book. And there is this A New Home for Ajiri is about a Chinkara in Kachchh who is cared for by the community of Jats and Maldhar, the pastoralist communities in Kachchh. So it's also about how they live and their lifestyle in that region. Sheru to the Rescue is about this group of animals in Kachchh. So the protagonist is a hedgehog, as you can see, but also like the smaller creatures. Like I mentioned, we like to talk about things other than tigers and leopards. So we have all these creatures, the hedgehogs and hares and the monitor lizards and all of them in Kachchh. They get together to protected grassland. So that's one of the stories. Then the Saving the Dalai Lama's Cranes is actually it's a book based in Arunachal Pradesh, where one of the rivers was threatened. A dam was going to be built on it, and it was a habitat for the black-necked crane, which is highly endangered. So it's again about how a group of young people come together to and protest against that dam being built, and also it's based on a true story. as is so all of these are actually they are fiction, they are storybooks, but they have basis in fact. So the miracle on Sundarbag Street is a lovely, it's a heartwarming story about this young girl in Bombay, and this actually happened in Bombay, in Bandra, and how she kind of brings together her community to like convert a dump yard into a garden, and that garden still exists in Bandra today. Similarly, and yeah, this book is also sorry, um, it's why is this happening? Huh. This is the Miracle on Sundarbag Street is also the winner of the Neve Book Award this year. And Pedro and the Big Boom is about mining in Goa and what that does to a community. Um, and yes, this is again our latest book, which just came out a few days ago. It's just been
Yeah,
published.
so I had to, push Tanya to say that we have to announce this because this is actually hot off the press, Shashwat. It arrived last week, and it's by Tanya.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, so, like every book, you have given us a brief. Tanya, what is that story? Give us a gist of that story again. The
Uh,
monster.
the monster who could not climb a tree is about a young boy who has anger issues, and he thinks there is a real monster living inside his head. And there is, in his neighborhood, there is this tree, a borsali tree, uh, and when he climbs it, the monster disappears. So
Okay.
that's why the title. So it's about how he finds peace and solace in that surrounding of a tree, and how he thinks of the birds and squirrels and lavurs and all that are on living on the tree, and then eventually the tree it's threatened to be cut down, and that's the story. So,
Indeed, very interesting, very interesting. And I should also say that we have another webinar series titled as Nature in Our Cities, where we have featured all these frogs, earthworms, and hedgehogs in our thing. It's so nice to see fiction stories being built around them. So just for mine, Sujata, and for that sake, what is the exact process that goes into creating these books? Because as we look at them, they're not just pure play fiction stories. There's a lot of research backed kind of a thing. So if you look at that that book itself, the Saving the Dalai Lama's Crane, while you spoke about the fact that it's based on actual events that have taken place in the Wang region, but there's also an element that you have somewhere uh, you know kind of use fiction to convey a very dark kind of a scenario that's happening all the time. So how do we transition from a world that is that is very dark, and if you look all around us, there's the reports that keep coming on, and convert them into stories which can be which are easy to read, which are inspiring, and they don't usually turn us morbid as most of the IPCC reports and other output do, right?
Yeah, I think we should actually be sharing stories of hope with children, because if you look at the world that children are growing up in, I think there is a lot of uh, there's a lot of reason to worry. The youth today are definitely worried, and I think the recent pandemic has not helped at all. If you speak to young people today, they're really concerned. They're really concerned about, like you say, the climate crisis. They're concerned about their future. They're concerned about their livelihood security and so on. But there are still stories of hope. Like Tanya mentioned, the miracle on Sundarbag Street. The author was actually inspired by something she read in a newspaper article about this group called, I think they were called Dream Grove. They called
Bandra's
the
Dream Grove,
project Dream Grove Project. And they were just citizens in the Bandra area, and they saw this dump yard. And if you look at the images today, it's a small place, but it's amazing the transformation that they created in that dump yard. And today they even talk about, they're talking about growing heirloom seeds, and so even the awareness seems to have expanded in that group of urban citizens. They're talking about using that space to grow and conserve certain maybe varieties of vegetable crops and things like that. Now, we have attended webinars where the author has told this story to kids, and it's amazing the kind of responses that it generates in children. We sometimes do a small little activity, and they write little things on the petals of a flower in which they say what they can do, and the responses have been really encouraging. So I think we should be sharing more stories of hope than stories of doom, because the doom stories they will anyway hear through newspapers or the TV channels or through conversations they hear at home or whatever. So having said that, I think you also started off by asking what the process is.
Yeah, from a manuscript to a book that, like the Tanya's book that has come out just recently, fresh off the press.
So we get manuscripts sent to us. In the past, we have put out 2 public calls for manuscripts, and Tanya and I vet them, and then we discuss those which we have shortlisted as possibilities. And once we decide that, this is something that we could take ahead, there may be a step in between with the author, which we see, if we see that, one major change needs to be made, maybe it's really too long, and if they're willing to cut it down or whatever, one thing, then we have that conversation with the author. And if the author is open, then of course, there is the formal process of signing an MOU with the author. And like you said, the next step is for Tanya and I to read it carefully and to not only just edit it from our end initially, but to also verify facts, check facts. And we have various ways in which we do it. We do our own searches. And we have, of course, the KV Kalpavriksh network. We have members, and we know that this member is an expert, say, has worked on mining for a long time. So we would share the story with that particular member. And then we also, because Kalpavriksh has been in existence for so long, we know people in the field, may not be Kalpavriksh members, but we send drafts highlighting the facts that we'd like to check or we'd like to verify, etc. So that's something that we do. Sometimes it is a bit difficult and time consuming, especially when it's really looking for information linked to flora, and that's even more difficult because you really need a botanist's mind to be able to understand all the technical terms that you. Once the facts checks are all done, then there is a process with the author where the editing takes place. So there is an up and down. For some manuscripts, Tanya and I handle the editing entirely by ourselves, but for some we do also invite an external editor. And then there is the whole the next step, which is to identify the illustrator. So maybe Tanya, you want to carry on from here? Oh, sorry. Just let me add. I'm so sorry. We also, I forgot to mention, we also share manuscripts sometimes with school children. So we have a few contacts who really helped us in the past, where we want to field test a particular manuscript just to see how children respond to it before we finalize the text. And we have had interesting comments from kids. Sometimes they say, please, this word is too difficult, or please explain this, we don't know what this means. And then we get that then is an indication realization for us that we need to look into it. Not for
See,
every book, but for some of the books.
so in fact, Sujatha, thank you. Before Tanya jumps in and takes us through the process of designing, I would like to reiterate for our viewers here. Typically when we see a book and we see the author's name on it, we assume that the author. There's a whole lot of back-end process that goes into all this thing. The editors are pouring through each and every word, each and every sentence, case, and they have these whole manuals with them. So actually, if you look at the whole process, it's a very rigorous process which takes place. So while at one end we have the authors, creative fantasies building up, castles in the air. The editors at the back end are, putting the real pillars in place for that. So yeah, just was that.
I can't agree more with you because I must tell you, commas give me a nightmare. And Tanya knows that. Very often towards the end, I'm constantly saying, do we need a comma here? Maybe this comma needs to be deleted. And she's better at commas than I am. So I go by her.
Yes, I get it. Yeah, Tanya, now let's talk about the other part of the struggle, the designing and the getting those visual narrative done.
Sure. So if once the story is there with us, the first thing we have to do is choose the right illustrator. Actually, I can share a presentation about that as well, because when I'm talking about illustrations, it'll be easier to show you.
Please.
Yeah.
Shenaz, you can share.
Can I share my screen?
No, this is not the.
No, not this.
Yeah. Is this the one? No.
I think you should just share screen, right, Tanya?
I'm sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, now the poop book and the poop book and all the three,
yes,
right? Yes.
So I just wanted to show you the illustrations that I was talking about. Yes, so when we get a manuscript, the first thing is to choose the appropriate illustrator. There are hundreds of illustrators who are fantastic, but the content has to match the style of the illustration. So if you see the poop book, it's like I was describing, it's a funny book for young kids. So we needed an illustrator who could bring out that fun element. So as you can see, these are paper cutout illustrations by Priya Kurian. She's done a fantastic job with it. Then this Pedro and the Big Boom is a chapter book. Like I said, it's about mining in Goa. So here we needed to have black and white illustrations of a certain style. This more people and their expressions, and so we were looking for an illustrator who could bring out that kind of detail. For our natural history books, some of them, so Poop Book is also a natural history book, but then for Critters, we felt that we needed a more realistic style. So if you see these illustrations, they are almost true to life. They're almost like photographs. These are by an illustrator called Sushma Durve. She's worked with us on our environment education programs also. So she's very, very particular about getting each and every detail about the species and subspecies right. So that process also, like looking at reference photographs, and then so when the illustrator initially the process is that they share rough sketches with us, and then we comment on it, and it goes back to them, and then the final ones come. So I'm just talking about this Something to Chew On is a book about food. Food in the sense, the history of how food evolved in the world, and in India more specifically, and the cultural aspects of food, the environmental aspects, about how our decisions about food impact the environment and things. So it was a very serious kind of topic. And so we got Rohan Chakravarti, I'm sure you know him, to make cartoons for the book. So this one is on hunting and gathering, hunter-gatherers. This is on shifting cultivation and how it preceded the agriculture that we have today. Then, yes, going ahead in the process, once the illustrator is, sends us the sketches, and we kind of give them feedback. Some of that also requires research. Like Sujatha was talking about how we need to do fact checking for the stories themselves. We also need to do it for the illustration. So traveling seeds is about a lot of different seeds, how they propagate. So some through air and some through water, and there are various ways in how seeds are dispersed. So we needed the seeds to be depicted accurately. So that also required a ton of research. We had to rope in a botanist. We had to go through research papers. And we had to ask people for photographs. And finally, then these are the illustrations that came out of that process. This book, so also accurately representing the place, the landscape, and the culture of the place. That's also important for us. That is also a process with the illustrator. So here in this book, the building that you see here, it's the monastery in Tawang. So these illustrations are Manila Favadia. So we had to kind of work with her to give her reference photographs. And so the author, this also sometimes happened that the authors insist more on accurate depictions of certain things. So here Neeraj was in this monastery they wear this colored robes and they fold them this way, and that has to be shown correctly. So those things also happen. Of course, that's sometimes we have to manage with all that. But so that is also part of the process. This is another thing. This is a book about a chinkara in Kachchh. And if you know, a chinkara, any animal doesn't have horns when it is born. So we were kind of we wanted to get it right, that in each part of the story, if the chinkara is say 2 months old, then what is the length of the horns? So if you can see, progressively the horns are increasing throughout the story. So here also we had to kind of refer to people working in the field and getting their inputs on how to best handle this and how to show this in the story. So that level of research is also required. And finally, one last point I wanted to make was that it's accuracy and fact checking and best representations is one thing, but there are also other smaller things that we look for in our illustrations. So for example, this is in Miracle on Sundarbag Street. This is the whole community who is sort of reviving that dump yard and turning it into a garden. So here, if you can see the diversity in the sense that there are kids, there are older people, there's a Sardarji, there's a Muslim uncle and auntie. So that kind of diversity also we try to avoid stereotypes of gender roles and things like that. So those things are also things we look at while working with illustrators. So once that whole process of illustration happens, then after the whole back and forth, then the design and layout happens, and then we take test prints to check the colors and how the fonts appear and the readability. We do proofreading, as Sujatha said, look at all the commas, and then finally it goes to press. So that's the whole process.
So just for my information, how much time would this whole process take? Say, from a submission of a manuscript to it ending into a book. I know it would be relative, but still, just to get a sense of the work that goes in the background. Yeah, Sujatha, you're on mute, Sujatha.
Am I still on mute?
No, yes.
So I would say once we accept the manuscript, it would take 6 months to a year, and more than 6 months, because then we need to also talk to illustrators, figure out when they have the time. And illustrations usually take minimum 2 months, usually 3-4 months for them to finish. Of course, it also depends on the length of the book and the kind of illustrations. But yeah, I would say.
Yeah, interesting. Now, just tell me one thing. What is you said once you select the books, what are the criteria that you select these books on? And if someone wants to, apply, what should they bear in mind when they're doing that?
So I'd like to say one thing, which is, I mean, we are an environment organization, and we do like to publish books which carry at least a slightly nuanced message. It can't be really simplistic, like don't use plastic, or don't cut a tree. We'd like a more in-depth message to go across with some nuances. But I just state this first before I answer your question. But we've also so we have some of our manuscripts which have come from people who are naturalists or who have worked for decades in a particular area, or decades on a particular issue in a particular area, and so on. And those stories reflect that kind of knowledge that they have, the kind of experience. But we also have published stories which have come from so-called non-experts or non-environmentalists, and we've accepted them because the story is very appealing. We really love the story. It's something that we feel children will enjoy. So we when we look at our authors, we have, I think, or the storybooks we've published both kinds. So when we receive a manuscript, we would like I said, would look at the nature environmental angle, how it's being dealt with. We would not, I think all publishers say that, we will not accept anything that is preachy or that is moralistic, which is trying to teach a lesson to kids. That's definitely a no-no for us. If there's something on, say, a lesser known species, or something on community conservation, something on an environmental issue, that's something that we would look at closely. I think we usually it's the age group 6 to 14 where we accept manuscripts. If there's something for younger children, we would definitely look at it if it appeals to us, of course. So far, I think this has been the age range that we've been working with. We do sometimes say that, write to us with an outline if you have in mind, only because you might take the effort of writing a full story, and we may already have published something on that, and then it would be a no-no for us. But we do not usually comment on outlines. Sometimes we receive in submission a very detailed outline saying that we'll follow up with a draft. We'll write the story later, but tell us if this outline is fine. We usually don't like to comment on that because the story could be very different. So we just ask for the story right away. Yeah, and I think the bottom line would be the storyline has to be good. I think that's the most important for us.
It has to be an engaging story.
It
That's
has to be an engaging story. And of course, if it's non-fiction, then it shouldn't be just information. It should be written in an interesting way. It shouldn't sound like very textbookish or
yes.
Wikipedia. The other thing that we sometimes see is that the storyline is very weak. There's a lot of conversation, and all the information comes through conversation between characters, and there's hardly any story. So
Yeah.
then we realize that there's no plot.
Yeah. This is
There's
just
nothing
dialogue going on.
dialogue to give the information. That doesn't really make it a story. So that's something that doesn't appeal to us.
Yeah. So for all the would-be writers, it should not be a script or a screenplay. It should be an actual fiction story. That is how it's. So another question which is often there in people's mind is, the kind of contracts that you have. How much money can they, can authors make on these books? And is there a real livelihood kind of a, people can make a livelihood out of this writing books like these? Your views, Sujatha, and then I would also like to, have Tanya's views on them as
So what we pay so far we've paid anything between 10,000 to 30,000 to an author for a book. Whether authors can make a living out of this, I'm not sure. Whether it's just writing and just writing children's books, book would take time even for the author. It's not something that happens overnight. So I think it would be difficult unless, you have some other source of income and you do this in addition. I think that would really be the reality for most people. I'd also like to just clarify that because we're also an NGO, we pay this amount as an outright amount, and we don't pay royalties after that, because this entire work is managed by Tanya and I. And, we just said that a lot of publishers pay an amount, but that's initially towards royalty. We pay it as a one-time amount, and we don't get into a contract with royalty.
Interesting.
Tanya, you want to add, Tanya?
Yes, so to answer your question, Shashwat, I would say that, not to discourage anyone, but I don't think one can.
Tanya, just one
Sorry.
thing. You have to also talk from an illustrator's perspective. How much illustrators can they also survive or earn from this kind of books?
Okay. Okay, so from an author's perspective, I'll say first that it's like Sujatha mentioned, the amounts 10,000 to 30,000 per story is probably not something that somebody can make a living off. And of course, there are stories that do get famous, like whatever Harry Potter or something, but you can't bank on that. There are millions of authors and millions of good stories which are not that famous. So when you're starting out, you can't bank on that to be your livelihood. The best thing would be to sort of write alongside some other source of income, and then once one book or two books are out there, then you yourself will be better placed to judge how to take it forward. And for illustrators, we do have most of the people whom we worked with, they are full-time illustrators. So again, it's about how good you are, and it's also dependent on luck. Like sometimes you may get one story which suddenly becomes a bestseller, or you win some award, and then you get tons of offers of illustrating. But starting out is, of course, difficult. So one has to be ready. With illustrators, one more thing, like I've had people asking me, how do I put myself out there. And so the best thing would be to initially be open to volunteer for things like, say, Story Weaver is a platform. Um, so like just work on building your portfolio first, and then when publishers are able to see that, that's when you will get more opportunities.
Indeed, and this also you've kind of led me to the second question is the relevance of printed books now. We are living in a world that is very much digitalized, or as we can say, Kindleized in that sense, where books and platforms like Storyweaver have been doing quite good, Pratham and everyone. So where do you see the printed book being, and especially in the context of the pandemic, was there an upsurge in I'm asking this as a parent also, because we were investing in a lot of books, but we were also realizing a fact: kids sitting at home, they were very traumatized by the amount of information that was being they were bombarded with. So did you see an uptick in terms of these books being taken up during these the difficult 2 years that we have gone through? Sujatha, please, we'll
Oh,
start with you as usual.
yeah. So about reading going digital, I hope not. I maybe I'm old world. I do belong to a older generation, but I still love the feel of a physical book. I haven't personally I haven't invested in a Kindle as yet, though I do have friends who say that it's really convenient to read on a Kindle. You can carry so many books with you and so on. So I hope that doesn't happen to kids. And somewhere when I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful that it'll still be physical books for a long time in India. It's
Yeah.
the digital world is also challenging for many kids from many regions. It has its own costs. So I'm still hopeful that publishing would
Yeah.
still be.
And did you see as at Kalpavriksh, did you see a uptick in terms of sales of these books during these pandemic times?
So, in the pandemic times, actually, during the lockdown, it was really difficult. And in periods, I mean, everything shut, right? We took our books off Amazon, we sell them on Amazon, and we put a disclaimer on our website store saying that there will be no sales. And for a short bit of time, we continued to manage some sales, all the orders that we got because we collaborated with Patandi, cafe bookstore, because they were handling their books through a courier service, and we thought, you know, uh, during the pandemic, neither Tanya and I were in Pune to be able to support the marketing. So we thought that that was the best arrangement for us. So we did manage some sales. I think where we lost out for Kalpavriksh, see, Kalpavriksh, one of the good avenues for us is our meetings. Members attend a lot of meetings, and all members carry books. And basically, there's also a number of people from the NGO world who are very excited when they see books like this. So they buy it for their kids or as to gift relatives or friends or whatever. So I think that was one thing that we missed. But otherwise, I would say that I feel that things are coming back to normal at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things I saw, you guys were at these book festivals and all that thing. I'm sure that is also a great avenue. And
Yeah,
now with hopefully we have crossed the the worst is behind us. So those
yeah.
things, those festivals and all that will again prove a lot very interesting thing. So Sujata, just one thing, we usually have a small excerpt reading where we love to hear the author, because while as you said the digital might not be great, the audible is very good if you we still have that thing. So if you can read some excerpts from us, it would be wonderful.
Yeah, I could. I'll read from a book that's not published by Kalpavriksh, but it's published by Eklavya. It's also set in Ladakh. So I'll just read a few pages, but I can
Yeah,
the
this one, right?
yeah. So
Oh,
this is the
Bumboo, of
story
course.
that
Yes.
it's called Bumboo, the donkey who would not budge, and it's illustrated by Madhuvanti Anantarajan. Bamboo was like any other donkey, born in the high mountains in Ladakh, playful, cute, and innocent looking. He helped Padma's family in many different ways. Bamboo carried manure to the fields and threshed barley and wheat. He sometimes carried No, Padma's younger brother. Bamboo enjoyed doing that. Nono was not heavy like the basket of manure he carried. Besides, Nono provided him some entertainment by singing along the way. Padma, however, was Bamboo's favorite. She doted on Bamboo and took great care of him. She made sure that Bamboo was back in his pen well before it was dark. Who knows? A hungry snow leopard could be lurking somewhere close to the village. As Bamboo grew up, Padma noticed that at night he behaved a little differently from the other animals. Padma's family had sheep and goats, a cow, and Bamboo. The pen was large enough for all. Every evening, Padma checked to see that their little troughs had water for the night, and she sometimes swept the pen clean. While Padma went about these chores, she noticed that Bamboo seemed to act strangely when the sun went down. While the goats and sheep would still be a little frisky and sometimes follow her around the pen, Bamboo would just fall down on his knees wherever he was. He would sit still, absolutely still, almost like a statue. Padma would never have paid any attention to this, except for the fact that she often noticed that Bamboo was in the exact spot in the pen in the early hours of the next morning. Oh, Bamboo, have you slept so soundly that you have not moved at all? She would ask, giving him a hug. Padma loved Bamboo's large, soft eyes. When she looked at them, she always imagined that an artist must have been called upon to draw them on Bamboo's face when he was born. One day, Padma and her family set off to attend a festival at a neighboring village. It was a long walk over narrow mountain paths. Bamboo carried Nono on his back all the way. Luckily, Bamboo was sure-footed like the wild blue sheep in the mountains. All went well till the little group was returning back to their village. The festival was a lot of fun and the family spent more time than they had planned to. Padma, her parents, and Nono were still a good 2 hours walk from their home. As the sunlight dimmed, Bamboo started to stumble over the pebbles on the path and more than once strayed away from it. Padma affectionately put her hand over his collar and tugged at his rope, whispering, Bamboo, are you tired? What's wrong with you? As the evening light grew dimmer, Bamboo moved closer to Padma and walked alongside her. Soon it was dark all around. Bamboo rose and brayed a loud cry of distress. What's wrong with that animal? Yelled Abale, Padma's father. I've been watching the way he's been walking, almost as if he's drunk on charm. He added angrily. I hope he hasn't taken ill, worried Amale, Padma's mother. Padma had her arm around Bamboo. She clucked with her tongue, a sound that she used to hurry up Bamboo. But Bamboo would not move an inch. Padma did all she could to coax him to walk on. She pushed him from behind, pulled his rope from front, and even held a carrot, a few feet in front of him to tempt him to move. Bumboo did not heed. Instead, braying out loud once again, he suddenly slumped down on his knees. Abale lost his temper. He pulled Bumboo up with all his strength, but Bumboo sat where he was as if turned to stone. That was a night Padma would never forget. After an hour of Padma's coaxing, Amale's scolding, and Abale's cursing, the family gave up. Abale stayed back with Bumboo while the rest of the family carried on. The next morning, a grumpy, sleepy looking Abale walked back to the village with Bumboo following him. This crazy donkey! He fell asleep where he sat, while I stayed awake all night, said Abale when he reached home. I was scared that a snow leopard or lynx would attack him. Should I carry on or?
Though I'm curious to know what happened. Yeah. So please, you brought us to a very interesting juncture.
So we'll have to go back to the. Yeah. So after Abale had had a wash and a warm cup of tea, Padma picked up the courage to talk about Bumboo's strange behavior. She told her parents about what had. Okay, I'll just cut this down. Basically, she tells her parents that this is exactly what I've seen in the pen. That very often when I leave at night and when I come back in the morning, he's exactly in the same spot in the same position and has not moved. So Abale listened to Padma carefully and then said, Hmm, that's just what happened last night. That's really strange. Maybe I should ask the Amchi about it. Later that week, Abale seemed to be in a thoughtful mood. Is anything the matter? Asked Amale, as Padma and Abale helped her make wheat dumplings for tuppa soup for dinner. Well, replied Abale, I met the Amchi today. He said that Bumboo seems to have a problem seeing at night. He called it night blindness and said that sometimes humans also have this problem. Night blindness? Oh my god, what's that? Asked Amale, looking up at her husband. Well, the Amchi said that some animals are born with this problem. Their eyes work well in the daytime, but at night or in very poor light, they have difficulty seeing. It's like being blind, but only at night. He asked us if we had noticed any odd behavior all at night when Bumboo was a calf. Amale's eyes opened wide. Oh my God, she exclaimed. Coming to think of it, I do remember Bumboo struggling to get the food on my palm whenever I fed him at night when he was very young. And so then this conversation amongst the family members, just to keep it a little short. Uh, so what Abale says is, since Bumboo has had this problem since he was young, he says, when the trekking season starts next month, we'll not be able to take him on long treks. He then becomes useless for us. Padma looked up at her father, shock written all over her face. She knew her father well and sensed what he may have meant when he called Bumboo useless. Abale, she said softly, plucking up courage. What do you mean when you say he's useless? Well, we have to feed Bumboo, right? And if we are not able to use him in the summer months when tourists trek to our mountains, then what's the use of keeping him? I think we should sell him and buy another donkey, or maybe even a horse. Padma's fears proved correct. No, please, please don't sell Abale. Don't sell him, Abale, cried Padma, running up to her father and giving him a hug. Abale couldn't handle his daughter's emotions. Be sensible, Padma, he said curtly. We're not such a rich family to be able to feed animals like Bumboo, he said, and he strode out of the house. So then subsequently, what happens is 2 weeks later, has taken her animals up grazing, and she's obviously very disturbed. And a relative of hers comes over. He's called Stanzen. So all of a sudden, Padma heard a gentle voice saying, Jule Padma, why are you crying? Padma looked up with a start and found Stanzen standing in front of her. Stanzen was a distant cousin. He was carrying a bulky rucksack on his back. I hope all is well at home, he asked Padma, as she wiped the tears off her cheeks. So then Padma explains exactly, the past, what has happened to Bumboo, and talks about the night blindness, and says that his father now is going to sell Bumboo. So, Stanzen listens to all this and says, said Stanzen thoughtfully, and you don't want Bumboo to be sold. No, he's been with us since he was born. His mother died when giving birth to him. To me, he's like a younger brother. I'll miss him terribly if he leaves us, replied Padma. And then Stanzen has to leave because he has to get to the headman's house because he used to make arrangements for the trek, and he's leaving the next morning.
Sujatha,
Ashwin, you want to say something?
Once I have one suggestion. So we can leave the readers here with the suspense what happened to Bumboo after this. So
Yes.
everyone,
How they managed to keep him.
it was wonderful. Just for our information, how did you typically donkeys, they are supposed to be dumb, and they're portrayed them that way, right? They're but I am very fascinated by donkeys for that matter. I find them to be one of the most intelligent creatures that we have. Most, I should say, underrated. How did you chance upon a story on donkeys and Bumboo? How did that name come across?
So actually, this actually happened. Not this particular story, but we were when we started the environment education program in Ladakh. We had chosen a school in a particular village, which was a 2-day walk from the nearest roadhead, Chilling village. So on day 2, the walk was a 10-hour walk. It would it would take the Ladakis 6 hours, but I needed at least like 9 to 10 hours to do the trek to the village. So this particular time when we did the trek, we always hired donkeys to carry the educational material in trucks to the schools. It was impossible for us to carry it on our back. And we would hire donkeys from the first village, from Skew. It was a village called Skew, and we had to walk to Markha, which was the further off village where our program was on. So Padma actually was the daughter of the house where we stayed, and she would bring in her animals. Once it was horses, once it was donkeys, whatever was available. So this particular time, we got delayed when we left for Markha, really delayed. And somewhere along the way, post lunch, when it was evening, Padma suddenly shared that one of her donkeys cannot see at night.
Oh, okay.
And she said that it would not move. It would not move. And for a while, we laughed, we joked, we made alternate plans. We didn't have enough sleeping. Tents. We were carrying tents, but we didn't have enough sleeping space for everybody because Padma was there who was going to stay in a house. Another colleague was there who was going to stay in a house. So we just had enough tents for a few of us. So we kept making funny or plans of what would happen when Bumboo would stop walking. But at some point, Bumboo actually suddenly stopped walking.
Oh,
And my colleague from the Snow Leopard Conservancy, Jigmith, while we were all wondering and panicky, we were still, quite far from the village. And you know what a night in a cold desert could be like. You freeze, really freeze. So suddenly he had this brain wave and he pulled out a head torch. We all had head torches in our bags, but he pulled his out and he put it on Bumboo's head, and Bumboo started walking, and that's how we managed to get to Malta. So this is just the other thing I'd just like to say is that I often think that all of us who live in urban areas, we're so used to having so many gadgets around us to solve whatever issue uh, that we face. That somewhere the creativity to think in situations like this, I've often found it in my colleagues in Ladakh. They're able to just look around and find a solution. Some people call it jugaad, but it's just something that we've lost, being surrounded by so many objects. So that was the inspiration for the story. The story itself, of course, is made.
So how was it once you actually shared the book with Padma and all? Did they see the book itself and were they surprised by Bumboo's celebrity status? I should say.
Yeah, that of course. So the very next trip, of course, my colleagues took the book to Padma. I could share it with my colleagues in SLC and Jigmith also, who's also acknowledged in the book. But they took it to Padma because what also happened is the bridge that took us, it was a water trolley. The water trolley that took us across to Skew, that got damaged. And it took a long time for that to get repaired. So the subsequent trips, I did, I think, 3 trips to Malta. The trip after this book was published was something that I couldn't do. Because the only way you could cross was to go across in a river, like a raft, and the director then said it's really dangerous because the waters there are quite fierce.
I can understand. Yeah. So I think so. We are just running. There are a couple of questions. I'll quickly take them on. So there's something that you had already mentioned, but there's a question around it. You don't have titles on tigers and elephant. Is that a conscious choice? Tanya, would you like to take that on?
Yes, I would say that is a conscious choice. Um, as you know that tigers, elephants, large mammals in general, they do receive a lot of attention, and there are thousands of other creatures in our country which are very important to the ecosystems, and which are, I mean, there are areas which are so diverse, and those are largely neglected, and we wanted to bring awareness through our publications to lesser known species. So that is in fact one of our focus. I think as an NGO we also believe that the focus on tiger conservation in our country, like all the government policies, the aid, the money that goes into conservation is all focused around that, and that kind of I mean, other creatures sort of lose out on what they should be getting. So in that sense, yes, it is a focus for us to create awareness, or try to create awareness for other creatures.
Interesting, and even if you look at the tigers in India, it's just one species that we have, the Royal Bengal tiger eye. And if you look at the other mammals, diversity that we have is humongous. If I remember, there was this talk on hedgehogs, and I realized that there are close to 300, 400 species of rats themselves in India, which is, if you consider even the kind of diversity that we have. So that's, I think, so that is one interesting that we have to also, while saving the tiger is very important, and we are not
Yes.
debunking that in any way, but it's equally important to look at creatures, the wild ass in for that incident in Kachchh, right? It's also there, the great Indian buster, and you have numerous species like that who are at the verge of extinction. Yeah. So there's another question is from Vijayda, who owns the IP of the book? Is it the publisher or the author? Sujatha, your take.
So, like right from the beginning, all our publications, not just children's publications, are have we've not had a copyright. We've not put out a copyright. In fact, now we publish all books with a Creative Commons license. But even prior to this Creative Commons license being available, all Kalpavriksh's books have been published without copyright. And that's basically, I mean, we don't believe in, we actually feel that, you know, the outreach, the dissemination, etc. We encourage people to pick it up, and as long as it's for non-commercial purposes, to freely, you know, make copies of it and distribute, disseminate. That's one way of raising awareness about these issues. So the current set of publications all come in with a CC license. So this is again one thing that we put into our contract, so that the author is aware that the book will be published with CC license.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting way. Creative Commons license is a way to, you know, kind of so you can use it as long as you attribute the, you know, the original authors and illustrators for that thing. So I should really commend you on that kind of thing, because usually in these days of, you know, IP production and copyright, that's so uncommon. Yeah. So a lot of our reports as Azim Premji University come under Creative Commons license. This one final question is, you know, do you take submissions for other languages, say Kannada or Marathi? Yeah, it's interesting.
The thing is that our outreach to all areas of India would not be possible. So what we do is we publish books in English, and then we try to collaborate with regional publishers to get the translation done and to get it disseminated in those areas. So through collaborations, our books have been translated into both Kannada and Marathi, as well as Gujarati, Telugu, Nepalese, Tibetan, Hindi. Yes, we work through collaborations, but as far as our own strengths and capacities for both for production as well as dissemination, we are limiting ourselves to English for now.
So submissions can be in English, but they can be translated once.
So yes, once the book has been produced, after that we look for collaborations with regional publishers.
So you know, we have almost run out of time for our thing. I had just one thing now that we have had a very interesting conversation, you know, giving us a snapshot of the 4 decade of thing that you're doing and the wonderful work that you're doing. I'm curious to know what lies ahead. So you had one, you know, initiative working with the Tatas, and what was the road ahead coming from Kalpavriksh? Sujatha, you as usual, I'll ask you first, and then Tanya. Yes, or I should break the chain this time. Ask Tanya first. Tanya, you go first.
Just more books. We want to publish more books. As far as the publication work goes, yes, we're definitely continuing. We do believe there's a readership out there. You know, we participate in events and we see the response, and there are still takers for printed books. And more than anything, we enjoy the process. So that's why we are going to continue.
Yes. And Sujatha, your words?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree fully with Tanya. Definitely, my first response would be more books in the future. And I also like to just add, I hope more translations, because I feel that also increases our outreach. You know, we've managed some languages, like Tanya mentioned, with list the languages where we have translated versions of some of our books. I really do hope we can increase our collaborations with regional translators, publishers. We keep trying. We hope that number will increase.
Yeah, interesting. So I just like to state, while we've come to the end of this thing, it's very interesting. You know, when we started this whole talk on nature writing for children, we were kind of unsure. You know, what is the bandwidth of books that we have? You know, how many authors we'll be. And we have been doing that. And when I discovered, for that instance, Kalpavriksh, I was surprised by the sheer, you know, the kind of books that you're coming out with. And also one fact that I'll love to mention for all our viewers: these books are not only, you know, Creative Commons license and wonderful fiction tales, but they are also very affordable, I should say. You know, in comparison to the typical books that you get on all the online things. These books are, in the range of 100, 150, 200 kind of a thing. They're very affordable. So I would encourage all of, all our viewers or whosoever is watching this and interested in this genre, to actually go down, search for Kalpavriksh website. They have an e-store where you can go through all these catalog of books. Some of them are, I should mention, they're out of run right now, but yeah, a vast majority of them can be ordered, and it will be a very interesting afternoon or weekends or evenings where you sit, curled up with these books and enjoy yourself. So thank you so much, Sujatha. Thank you so much, Tanya, for sparing your time today and spending with us, taking us through this whole journey itself. And it was so interesting to see all those wonderful covers, the visuals, and yes, of course, knowing more about Bumboo for that matter. It was great pleasure talking to you.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And with that, I will take the leave of the viewers. We'll meet you next time on our next edition of Nature Writing for Children. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you.